Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show planned today. Jennifer Holdsworth-Karp and Philip Wegman weigh in on the Supreme Court's decision to hear a direct challenge to Roe v. Wade in Mississippi come December. Plus, reporter Josh Aziza discusses the gig delivery bikers in New York City intent on improving their own working conditions. And The Hill's Julia Manchester has been on the pulse of the Virginia governor's race and will get us up to speed on the election being viewed by many as a bellwether in the Commonwealth ahead of midterms.
But first, Tulsi Gabbard announced she has been on active duty tour and deployment to Africa as a civil affairs officer supporting a special forces mission to go after al-Qaeda-affiliated jihadists. Gabbard, who's long been a supporter of bringing American troops home from Afghanistan, made an appearance on Fox News with Tucker Carlson, where Carlson asked her what kind of system allows the military to lie about the loss of human life. While she pointed out civilian casualties are tragic, she also made the point about jihadism to the American people.
I think it's important for the American people to understand that Islamist jihadists are continuing to wage war against us. And the Islamist ideology, not the same as the religion of Islam, but this Islamist ideology, which is a political ideology that inspired the terrorist attacks on our country on 9/11, is the greatest threat that we're facing right now in this country and the world. It is the foundation of governance of so-called Islamic countries like Turkey and Iran and Saudi Arabia and Pakistan. And it's what's behind the discriminatory policies that they have in these countries against Christians, Hindus, Buddhists, atheists, and others. So as long as these Islamist jihadists are waging war against us, we have to work to defeat them militarily and ideologically. And militarily, we have two choices in how we do that. Number one, we can continue to invade and occupy and nation-building countries around the world, just as we did in Afghanistan, at great cost. Number two, we can take a targeted approach using airstrikes, using our special forces to go in and go after these terrorist cells. The reality is that the cost to the American people, the cost to our troops, the cost to civilians will be far less if we take this very targeted approach to go after these jihadist terrorist cells than if we continue making the very same mistakes that we saw in Afghanistan and other parts of the world of invasion, occupation, and nation building.
And so what's so amazing about that answer is that you have to understand what the question was. Tucker Carlson asked her, why is there no accountability for the military figures who ordered and carried out this assassination of this innocent family outside of Kabul? Mm-hmm. That was the question, and she went into a rather formulaic reiteration of something that she has said over many years, though I think will come as a shock to a lot of people out on the internet who became huge Tulsi Gabbard fans, particularly after 2016, when in the waning days of the Bernie Sanders campaign, she endorsed him and denounced the DNC, and since then has been kind of a leading light of a kind of small faction of the internet left that never, I don't think, explored her politics in a very deep way. This is something that she has been saying for many years now, and it represents essentially what is Biden's position, which is that, okay, we're going to draw our troops down, but we're going to maintain the right to launch airstrikes anywhere around the world. She puts it in much more crusader religious terms than most people are comfortable with in D.C. But this is who she is.
Yeah, I was struck by quite a bit in these comments. I mean, this could be, you could put Bill Kristol in there and have these words coming from him.
Are we allowed to say that?
Well, it was borderline. I mean, just to talk about Turkey, a NATO ally that is, of course, an Islamic nation, as though they're all Islamic extremist jihadists, kind of lumping them in with, say, Iran, who very much so that is the case. That struck me as somebody who's, as a conservative who's for strong national defense. Even I was struck by quite how far she went there. But the bigger question is this. the discussions over this botched strike where our intelligence failed and 10 civilians were killed, including 7 children. And she's then defending this over the horizon policy where we should just do targeted strikes from a distance based on intelligence. Well, this shows the shortcomings of that approach. It shows that you're going to have more civilian casualties. You're going to have failed operations. And the real question that I would pose, to the Biden administration that I don't think we've seen an answer to is they're going to rely going forward on over the horizon approaches. I don't think either of us disagree that they're going to continue to target terrorists within the region. But how are they going to do that without having intelligence on the ground? That's how something like this goes so wrong. And she really didn't have any answer there she kind of just glossed over the fact that we just killed 10 civilians and it had nothing to do with terrorism, ISIS, or any other entity.
Right, and this is one of thousands of civilians, these are 10 of thousands of civilians who've been killed in this conflict. At least this one is getting attention, and Biden is pledging to investigate it. If they actually put resources into investigating every one of the airstrikes that where the U.S. claimed they had eliminated some type of terrorist threat, but had actually, in fact, just eliminated another family, they would run out of investigators extremely quickly. But it's good that at least this one is being looked at. But here's what Jen Psaki had to say about this.
I would say first, the president's view and all of our view is that the loss of any civilian life is a tragedy, as was made clear in the comments by the Secretary of Defense, by General McKenzie. This was done in error, and clearly the investigation that will continue is something the president broadly supports. So as a human being, as a president, as somebody who has overseen loss in a variety of scenarios, both as a leader and personally, his reaction is it's a tragedy, and every loss is a tragedy, and he supports the effort to move this forward as quickly as possible and to have a thorough investigation.
Should it be anticipated that someone would be fired, demoted, not promoted, passed over, and held accountable within the military ranks for this?
I think what's important is that the Secretary of Defense and the Chairman and General McKenzie came forward and made very clear that this was they wanted to see this move forward quickly. They wanted to be as transparent as possible. They wanted to learn from what had happened. It's also important to note what the circumstances were here.
So a few things. She calls it a tragedy, which of course it is, but it's a failure. It was a failure of a policy decision. It was a failure to target what was clearly not an imminent threat. This is something that we can't forget is the Biden administration came out and said, we thwarted an imminent threat. Clearly that intelligence was wrong. I'd like to know, Jennifer Griffin in the Pentagon press briefing yesterday asked a very specific pointed question, which was this car was returning to a residence. They were pulling into a residence. What imminent threat could they have been posing going into their residence as opposed to departing and potentially going to Hamid Karzai? So there's just a lot about the flawed intelligence that led to this that they need more answers on. But one thing I would note as well is the Pentagon came out and said that they were going to appoint a 3-star flag officer to investigate this. The problem is, we all know how DOD is. It's very chain of command deferential. So I just wonder, is a head going to roll if you've got somebody who's, less senior than the people that were making these decisions, the one investigating it?
No, it's a good point that they have drones flying in circles, with fixed cameras on these positions. So they saw that the car pulled into the driveway. They see that the car is nowhere near the airport. Let's say that they do believe that what the water that the aid worker is bringing into the car is actually explosive. Let's say they believe that. He's not going to blow up his own house, right? Like you said, he still has to back up onto the road. He still has to go all the way to the airport or to some other civilian area that is under threat or that the U.S. is concerned about. At which point, they clearly have this place marked. Like they can watch it the entire way. And from the reporting, we know that as he pulled into his driveway, his children came rushing out, as children do when you come home. So how do you see that and then say, oh, well, we need to pull the trigger? And the only answer is that this was endemic. that this was how they've been doing it for 20 years. And that you add the heightened sense of risk from the strike the other day, all the pressure, all the attention, and you take what had been endemic and you ratchet it up a couple of notches.
Well, and my fear is this, is that the Biden administration felt like they had to have a head roll. They needed to catch some terrorist or kill some terrorist because of the 13 U.S. service members that were killed, that they were a little too trigger happy just to go after someone. But I'd also raise just close with this question. Are we actually going to still go after ISIS? Is there going to be retaliation for the attack on U.S. forces? Because to me, it seems like we've turned the page and, Biden's trying to talk about anything other than Afghanistan. So it seems very possible that we're not even going to hold anyone accountable for that attack.
Well, I'm sure we will drone some of them as well. And in the process, we'll take out more innocent people. Well, we'll see. We'll be covering it here. And we'll tell you what's on our radars up next.